Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the AXR Sales Director Incubator, the program that helps you make better career decisions and be prepared for a great career conversation. My name is Mike Dixon. I run the sales and marketing practice for AXR Recruitment and Search. On this program, we introduce you to an amazing group of sales directors who will share their career journey. We'll talk about advice they've got about mapping out your career, and we'll also get some insights into what life is like as a sales director. Welcome to today's guest, Kim Mouret, VP of Sales for P&G's personal healthcare business across ANZ, Middle East, Asia, and Africa. Kim is joining us from her home in Singapore today, so thanks for getting up so early, Kim. But I kind of guess you're in the role you've got, you're used to those calls at different times of the day.
Indeed. Good morning, Mike, and good morning to everybody. I am very used to calls at all different times of the day. Usually in this part of the world, it's the nights. It's only Australia who's sort of earlier than us. So usually it's nights, so they go late into the night, but not the morning. But today is, of course, an exception, and I made it. That's the starting point.
Yeah, I'm also impressed as well. Your second jab yesterday for COVID, so we were touch and go as to how you'd react. So if you swoon away during the call, we'll forgive you. But you feeling okay?
Indeed. Yes, I so far a bit of a dead arm, but apart from that, all good, and better to have the jab than not to have it. So it's well worth the pain. And for anybody, when you guys do finally get it in Australia, please do it, and let's get the world open again.
100%. We'd like to travel again. Australia's lovely, as is Singapore, but we'd like to travel between the two at least.
Indeed.
Fantastic. For those of you who are new to the incubator session, the format of the call, we'll run this for 45 minutes, mainly just a conversation between Kim and I. We do encourage you guys to get involved. There's a chat facility. Feel free to ask questions as you go. We've got lots to get through, but I will keep my eye on that. If there's anything burning, then feel free to jump in. And for those who can't make the full 45 minutes, if you've got to run away to a session, just to reiterate, we also have a podcast, Your Future in Sales and Marketing. All the sales director incubators for this year and last year are hosted on that podcast, Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You can easily subscribe. We also have the marketing director interviews on there as well. So really, for those who are into podcasts, jump on. We've got lots of listeners, which is cool. So let's get into this, Kim. Couple of things just to understand, you and your mindset before we get into your career. So I've asked you, a few things about you. So let's get into this. Best pre-COVID holiday destination. Where'd you like to go?
Yeah. Wow, that feels like an eternity ago now.
Doesn't it just?
It does. Living overseas, that was one of the reasons, for taking an overseas posting to travel the world. And we lived in Geneva for 10 years and we took every opportunity. I think the most memorable was back in July 2019. My eldest son finished his IB and we went with two families to Morocco. And it was amazing. It was culturally adventurous. We spent the first half of the holiday in Marrakesh, which is bubbly, exciting, crazy, chaotic. And then we hiked up into the Atlas Mountains, and we had the second half in the Atlas Mountains, out in the desert at a tented campsite. So we had a bit of everything with our closest friends, and it was amazing. And if everybody has the chance ever, hopefully in the future, do go there. It's before it changes, it's spectacular.
Yeah, I've been to Morocco a couple of times. I'm with you. It's really different. It's culturally such a contrast, and it feels like a very enriched cultural place. There's just so much to do, the smells, the sights, and you can get so lost in that and engrossed in it.
Yeah, and it's diverse, and the people are welcoming, and it's different, and it's not, it hasn't moved too fast, so it still keeps lots of its rich culture and history. Yeah. And it's amazing. So well worth it for sure.
Absolutely. Well, we'll move slightly closer to home with the next question. Obviously, you're in Singapore, but Australian nationality, and from Sydney. So, if you had $50 billion to invest in Sydney to create your legacy, what would it be?
50 billion. I'd love.
It's a lot of money.
It's a huge amount of money. I think. Am I allowed to split it in half?
Yeah, go on.
Okay, thanks. So I think I do two things. The first thing I do is that I probably build a number of desalination plants. I'm so depressed that Australia hasn't managed, for the future very well. And we go through this sort of peaks and trough with having water and not having water. Now the dams are overfull. 10 years ago we were, right on empty. So I think I'd start with thinking of the future and put some desalination plants. I don't know how much they cost, by the way, but I assume a few billion each.
You get a couple?
Yeah, I think I'm going to get a few. And then the other thing that I would do is set up a better infrastructure for domestic violence. I'm watching the news from afar, and I'm, ashamed and disappointed to see the infrastructure and what's still going on in, what's considered a developed nation. I would probably put, the counselling facilities and infrastructure in place to ensure that there's no domestic violence and abuse, and if there is, people are able to escape it. So that would be my two legacies, and I think I tick the box for them each of my three children. I'd be happy that I've sort of set something up that's for the future.
Yeah, fantastic. Great ideas. I wish we did the $50 billion to spend, but that'd be money well spent.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's get into your career and questions about your career. I'm always curious, as you become more senior in an organization. A lot of this podcast and this program is around helping people think about career conversations. Is it different as you become more senior? Do you approach and think about a career conversation in a different way?
That's a really good question, and I should know that because I've had a long career. I've had a rich and long career. I don't think my approach changes. What changes what is important to me. And I get better clarity. And I wish, if I looked back, I had that clarity at the start, because you don't know what you don't know. So I think that my approach, I was, always in a very big hurry. I thought I knew what I wanted, and then I'd get there and decide, actually, that's probably not what I wanted. There was something else. And I've landed and moved. I think, in hindsight, I'd probably just slow down a little bit, not feel the need to rush, take things that tick all the boxes. Sometimes I sort of was a bit opportunistic, and it's not that I regret everything, but I feel like there was other opportunities that I probably didn't take along the way that might have been even better suited to my career along the way. And I would have asked more. I was so excited by opportunities that I sort of jumped into them, and now I would sort of consider, is this really what I want? Is there other options? Do I need to do it now? How do I balance the family part of it? And I wouldn't change any of my history. I have a mantra of no regrets, but I would certainly, just give it a bit more forethought, I think.
It's interesting, that point around, I guess, perspective you get with experience, because some of the conversations I've had with sales directors and marketing directors in this program are around, when are you ready for a move? And often the moves you make when you are not 100% ready are quite exciting. But I guess the flip to that is sometimes dwelling for longer in a role is not a bad thing either, because there's maybe more to it than you potentially think, because you've been through one cycle. The next cycle, that role could be really challenging.
Yeah, I know, but that sort of control, I think, is really hard. If you're in that space, you don't know what's ahead of you, and you want to be opportunistic. I mean, people often ask me, should I just take anything? And I always say, don't take anything or everything. Choose, make sure it ticks your boxes, and then pursue it. I think people often don't think you're never ready. There's many things that you're never ready for. I've had many roles where I really didn't think I was ready for it, and then you get into it, and that's part of learning. I mean, that's what a new challenge is about, and a new opportunity is stretching yourself, getting out of your comfort zone and doing something that's really different. So I would always take the opportunity as long as it was ticking on my boxes, but not just for the sake of ticking the next move and being impatient to move forward.
Yeah. I mentioned also you're Australian. You're in Singapore now. You've also lived and worked in Switzerland. You've been with P&G in different guises for 20 years. But I'm thinking again about those career conversations and career decisions. What's been the most difficult career decision you've had to make?
That's a really good question. I think that toughest move for us was that decision to move out of Australia in the first instance. It's really, my first role was into something that was completely different, looking after a pet care business that we had in Western Europe. And I really didn't know anything about the business. The model was completely different. And I was uprooting my whole family. I had 3 little children at the time. My husband was in a very good, secure job, and he and I had to balance. And he really encouraged me. He was like, we have this mantra of no regret. So try it if you don't like it. But it was a big decision leaving. I'm very close to my family. I had a really good stable job. We had a great group network of friends that we'd sort of, grown up with. And that was a really tough call. And what we decided is we'll do 2 years. And if we, if everything goes to, to jelly, then we'll head home. So that was like 12 years ago. Here we are. We're still sort of working out sort of when that right time would be to head home.
Yeah, I told my mum that 10 years ago I'll be out of the country for 2 years.
Indeed.
And
Indeed.
yeah, she stopped asking if I'm coming back now.
Yeah, it's same for us. We're exactly the same sentiment, and the same for my family. But I think you also probably know, well, I knew when we were in Geneva, when it was time to come back here and be closer to home. And I think when you had that feeling, you just have to wait for the right occasion then to make the jump, or the right opportunity to come up, and not be impatient again just to jump into something automatically because it's there.
Yeah. And interested too in support you've had along the way, and and as we go through our careers, we lean on people for advice, and whether that's mentors or line managers or friends and colleagues. What's the best piece of advice in terms of your career that you've had, Kim?
Yeah, I think my very first boss, who is still a mentor for me, basically told me, just make sure that you love what you're doing. And I know it sounds really simple and intuitive, but it's so important. I think that we spend so much time doing our job and at work, and if you really don't like it, then get out. It's really contagious when you're not happy. And so I think firstly, love what you do, and if you don't, make a change. Because then you'll do a much better job. You'll be happy in yourself, and that makes a big difference. That's sort of for me the crux of where I start everything, which is, do I like it? Do I feel good about it? Does it meet my needs? And then the second thing is that to be prepared to give things a try. I had an opportunity at one stage to do a capability role, which didn't really tick the boxes for me, but it was an opportunity to go into another business unit, and I decided, okay, I'll try it. And worst thing that happens is I jump back out, and I did it. I jumped in, I tried it, I tested it. I didn't fit perfectly, but actually learned loads of things along the way. And then I went back to my direction, which is much more broader than focusing one core area of sales.
I love that concept, and as you say, it seems so simple, like what you do, but often I think people stay in a role where they're not wholly engaged. I think partially that's because they perhaps lack context or a plan, and you then get stuck in this moment of just repeating a poor experience and then feeling pretty disengaged with your job that has a poor impact. Yet reality is, you control your career, you control the decisions you make, and sometimes that means if you're not enjoying a role, then you can do you do something about it. That doesn't mean you have to leave your organization. It means you talk to the right people in your organization. And in your experience, is that a tough conversation to have if you're unhappy, and you kind of then go to your business to say, actually, I'm not enjoying this, and this is the reason why?
Yeah, no, I think that's really fair. I think that there have been a number of times in my career where I haven't been happy, whether it wasn't what I expected, it's not delivering, I wanted to go faster. And I've always been very candid with my management, specifically my management, certainly not my team, but my management about that. And I've been encouraged to make something of it myself. Like, you control your own destiny. And at times I felt like, okay, I'm ready to go to the next step, or I want something bigger, give me more. And what I learned, especially coming back to this region, is you can create lots of opportunities yourself. So an area that I'm very passionate about is equality and inclusion. And when I got into this, back into this region, I didn't really know anyone. And I really stepped out of the box to actually meet people and do some different things so that I stretched myself to learn more. So I really believe that, sometimes we give up on a role, say we've done it, we've ticked all the boxes, but there's so many opportunities to actually do, to create more and different learnings and projects along the way. And you really have to step back and think, if you think you've nailed it, then I think that, you're only seeing half the picture. There is always something else to do. There's something to be reinventing. If you think about strategy, it's evolving. It's not static at a point in time. So, part of your job is to help develop that and think what's coming next. We talk a lot about those S curves in our business, what's coming next. And if you think that you've nailed it, then you haven't been thinking beyond. And I think that's, that's available to everyone. It's up to you to pursue it. And that's the sign of, I think, also, an up and coming manager, to look for those places, learn something out of it, and then move on.
Great advice. I really like that. Question come through on the chat from Dimitri at Sandoz, the part of the Novartis business, of the private label part of Novartis, if I remember correctly. Kim, so who's influenced your career the most?
So I think the person who's, I've had numerous people that have influenced in some ways. I think Dimitri and I worked together when I was doing lots of work in Russia in the past. And one of the persons who's had the most influence is the CEO we had for that, a joint venture we worked on then, a guy called Brian de Boutelier, who was amazing leader, highly strategic, able to take the most complex thing and make it very simple. Take, all the different functions and get the absolute best, point us in the right direction, and then enable the team to go forward. He was very calm, very clear on where he wanted to go, but let all of the functions drive themselves. He always brought us back to actually understand what have we learned, and he lifted the bar higher for us all the time. Like when we thought we were doing well, he told us, okay, there's someone higher, there's more to do, you can even do further. We were leading sort of the industry, we were going ahead, we thought we were ticking all the boxes of our internal metrics, and he just told us, this is one part of the industry, look here, they're even doing more, and what have you done in this space? So he really pulled us and pushed us to really take it to the next level. And I love that. Set that bar higher and higher and then exceed it. And that was a super exciting time for us. The business was on fire. We were learning because we were in a joint venture. So it was an internal, external. And he really played the role of, using the strengths of both individual parent companies, which were in this joint venture, in enabling us to, go forward. Amazing, amazing leader.
Yeah, so it sounds like a high performance coach, doesn't it? That's a real high performance mindset. When you kind of you're going well, but you've got to look for different perspective of how you raise that bar and can keep pushing. So I love that mindset. One of the things we talk a lot about in this program, and it's I think critically important in terms of career mapping, is ensuring that whilst you have a functional specialization, you maintain breadth. And we talking about McKinsey's T model, which is talking about experiential breadth on top of your functional specialization. From your perspective, when do you think somebody should broaden, and when do they specialize? How do they approach those decisions?
Yeah, I think that's been a question for me very regularly across my career. And I think you need to know what you want to be when you grow up. You need to, and sometimes you don't know until you get in and you try it. But if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. So I think you have to decide firstly do that sort of mind map. What are the things that I like? Where are the areas that I, bring most to the party? What do I enjoy the most? Sometimes people want general management just for the sake of, ticking the box on general management. In PNG, we often have the career of going into sort of like a commercial leader, which is very rounded, multifunctional, or you can do a functional sort of leadership role, as I do today. And, for me, I've done both, and I love both, but I think that you have to give both a little bit of a test if you're not sure. I think that part of what you need to do is give things a try, understand the things that are most important for you, and then determine where you want to be in the future. I also believe that you don't have to decide it and then you can't go back. If you don't like something, I went into capability. I enjoyed it, but I didn't want to spend my whole life doing it. I stepped back after, I think less than 12 months of doing that. But it taught me lots of other areas on, how to grow talent and where are the most important things, and focusing on one or two things. So I think that, there isn't any right time. There's not, but knowing what you want will certainly help you, take the right road for you. And don't assume just because you've gone down a road that you can't turn around and come back. I see people reinvent themselves at, 40, 50, all the way through, and do it very successfully. So it's, it's a mindset.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's having the confidence to accept that not every step has to be a leap forward in terms of your career. That once you set your goals, and I think as you said before, there's many paths to get there. When thinking about this program, a lot of the people on the call are in sales. That's the kind of core functional specialization, the sales director incubator. But with that in mind, if the core function is sales, for a sales individual, what do you think the best broadening roles are?
Yeah, I think there's a number, but I think one that gives you an opportunity to learn something new. So I think that as salespeople, there's a sort of a traditional trajectory. You go up, you start in the field, you go up to a first level sales manager, you go up to a national sales director, you probably go into a category, do a little bit of work or shopper work. I think for me, there's no defined space for, what's the best broadening, but somewhere where you're learning something new, something that you will use going forward, something that takes you out of your comfort zone. I think if you're in your comfort zone, you're not really pushing yourself to the limits. I've done a couple of times when I jumped business. I was in pet care. I moved into healthcare. It was really, really different. I moved from an internal role to external roles. And each one of those, I think, has been really critical in understanding, what can I learn from this, and what's next, and how does that set me up? So I don't think there's sort of a one set, way to do this, but I do think that, it's everybody takes their own path. You use the opportunities, then you navigate it accordingly. And each and every one of those roles, it develops something. When it's not developing, then you start to look beyond that.
Yeah. And within sales, as you say, there's you can be managing regional or global teams with more of an internal focus, and if you're direct to consumer, you've got more of an external focus. You've got different markets and regions you can work in within a business, different categories. So there's lots of ways to broaden within that sales function. A question from Ali actually to that does kind of talk to that. Kim, your remit covers a vast region. How do you manage your global team's performance whilst also balancing your personal life and still having time for Netflix? Interestingly.
That we do. It's funny, this question always comes up. I'm a mum of 3. I've moved around the world. Actually, the first time I moved to Geneva, I moved by myself. My husband was still in Australia, finishing his role. And, that balance, I think everybody has their own personal equation of like what is balance and what's right for them. And that changes, it evolves over time. It evolves as your children are growing up. It evolves as you're going into different roles. I think, defining where you want to go is the starting point with retirement career, and then finding that sweet spot. I go in and out of being in the, perfect equilibrium all the time. When I'm going out, I check myself back. Sometimes I know that I'm there for an interim period and I can't sustain it. Like, it becomes all heavy. We made a couple of acquisitions, and that work coming up to an acquisition on a merger and acquisition, it's very intense. And then you get through it and you have to do the transition, and then you have to do the integration. And that's sort of like the work peaks and troughs. And so knowing, where you can push and how you can push, I think you have to find what's right for you, and knowing when you're pushing it, and, when you've gone too far, and then taking off, time to recover. I've always used my holidays. I am not storing them for a rainy day. I feel like that's the balance. And when I'm off, I'm really off. I'm doing something different and I'm enjoying. And then when I'm on, I'm 100% on, and that's whatever that takes. It may be very long hours. As far as measuring the metrics, we're working with 33 countries in the region, and every one of those is in a different state. And we're partnering with the commercial leaders in those businesses. And our job is really as a servant in a regional role. We're a servant to them. We're providing them the tools that allow them to reach the growth. So we're finding this sort of sweet spot. And our metrics are the same. And then that way we're working together. And I think if we're not measured the same way, it's really hard to actually understand, how do we partner, and what is our role in that equation. And I think that we do in PNG, we do that very well. It's not that there's unhealthy, and any unhealthy, healthy tension. There always is, because we're always wanting more, and the countries are pushing back, but the countries also bring us back to reality with this is what's happening, and this is bringing that outside perspective in. And when you find that sweet spot, the business just, accelerates and blossoms. And part of that is not wanting to do everything today. It's about setting a beacon and, riding towards that beacon as quickly as you can.
Yeah. Okay, great. Kim, your career within P&G, 20 plus years, you've done a lot of things. It's been really interesting when you look at the steps you've made and the various experiences that you've been able to gather and different roles. A lot of that, I imagine, to do with your profile within the business. And a lot of people on this call or listening to the podcast will be thinking, how do I raise my profile? Particularly the last year has been challenging because we've not been together as much, or people haven't been traveling. But what advice would you give in terms of actually making your profile resonate in a meaningful way within an organization?
Yeah, and I love that you say like meaningful way, because there's writing, there's doing things because I'm ticking the box, and there's doing things that are, I think, authentic and that help you grow your profile. And after working outside of this region, I came back. I really didn't know anyone in the region, and you have to build your stripes again. You have to build your who you are, and be recognized. And I think there are a couple of thoughts or suggestions I have to people, which is be deliberate. Like, it doesn't just come, people don't come to you. I mean, everybody's very busy, so be deliberate. Identify those key people in your organization that have profile who could help you to add value. Second is choose people that want to do that. There are some people that are natural coaches and mentors, and there's some who actually don't. It's not their thing, and so don't go chasing those who are not interested. It's just going to it's not really going to end in not tears, but it's not going to help you. Reach out for things that aren't in the classic job description. Again, there are lots of projects, initiatives that are happening for us, sustainability, diversity. There are lots of other areas that you can drive your profile that aren't in your deliberate inner circle. I think, especially in bigger organizations, try and work across the multifunctional team. And then the final area is like, don't be shy about showcasing your work. I see some amazing work from some really junior talent, and it sometimes doesn't filter up. I mean, you should be proud when you're doing things that are different, when you have a perspective. Be loud and proud about it. It doesn't mean that you have to be audacious. It doesn't mean that you have to be bragging. There's a way of delivery, but do showcase your work. I think some of the best ideas come from those who are, especially in sales, out in the field, at the cold face. They see what's happening and they come up with ingenious ideas. And sometimes it doesn't, make its way to the, to the senior management. So be deliberate, like set up times, talk with your manager about finding places. When you're in a meeting, don't just sit there. Make sure that you're talking up, have an opportunity to introduce yourself and your point of view. There are many, many different ways, and I really encourage people to do that. It also builds your own confidence. Once you start talking, I mean, that first step is so hard, especially, when you're the most junior person in the room. But I would, encourage everyone to, have a seat at the table. You're there for a reason. You're more knowledgeable than you think, and stretch yourself. When I came to the region, I deliberately set up, meetings with all the key people outside of my function, outside of my business unit, to really meet and understand, learn from some of the things that are happening in the region, and no direct reports or direct, correlation to my career, really just to, get some different perspectives. So again, for those who are in large enough companies, that's fantastic. For those who aren't, I would suggest people just also build a network that's outside of their immediate, whether it's an industry network, whether it's a team of females, whether there's lots of different groups today, and there's brilliant ways to network, and use that as a sounding board for you as you go forward, and learn from what other people are doing to sort of move their career forward.
Yeah, some great advice there. I think connecting with people, and because one of the ones question I was going to ask is around the kind of the annual review. It's something that often comes up, and people talk to me with frustration that they're approaching me as a recruiter because the review hasn't gone well, and they feel it's their one chance a year to raise their profile or set their agenda. But to me, that's the wrong approach. The review is, if that's the system a company has in place, is yes, it is a check-in. It is a focus point to talk about your career. But if you're working through the year with all the kind of stakeholders in your career across your organization by sticking your hand up for projects, accepting, to your point, if you're in a meeting, and even if you're a more junior person, you're there for a reason. So feel free to contribute. A lot of people sit very quietly on the sidelines and think they're learning from others around them, but you'll learn if you participate. And therefore, when you get to that annual review, your career is on the agenda. It's something that person's been thinking about. It's not this kind of chore for them as it is for you. It's an iterative conversation based on the fact that you've been profiled and present through the organization throughout the year. So I think you make some really good points there, because that will make that review conversation a lot more enriched than if it's just a once a year tick box.
Yeah, look, I couldn't agree more. I actually think the whole review thing, it's very stressful for people because it's a snapshot in time, right? Around that month, what happened? But actually 12 months is a long period. Lots of things have happened across that. We went in and out of COVID, and I think there's a couple of thoughts that I had. Firstly, make sure you have, like, what are the things that I need to achieve? like outline those up front at the beginning of the year. Make sure they're very clear. How is your manager measuring you, and what would success look like in your mind and their mind? The second thing is do a check-in. Like we have a process of doing it quarterly. This is the progress I'm making. This is where this is where I've got to adapt because COVID came, it changed the world, and 3 of the things I wanted to do no longer can, be on my work plan. I need to adapt those to, new agility, new items and projects. So make sure that you're, reviewing those. And the final thing is, and update it as you go through with your manager and with yourself. Like sometimes I get to the end of the year and I go, what happened in the year? Oh, in the last month I did this, but actually I had lots of, wins along the way, and I just make sure that I'm capturing them and, in my diary on a piece of paper that reminds me of all the things that I've progressed and that are, achieving what I set out to do. And reminding myself for nothing else what I've achieved, but also my boss, like as I close the quarter, this is where I've made, and I'm adapting now for this, or this is what I didn't achieve and this is why, or this is a gap, and wow, in the next quarter I need to actually get going on that. It's sort of sitting there and it keeps just rolling forward. So I think just being very deliberate about that, and it takes the stress then also off that last meeting, which shouldn't be the hinge role. I mean, your manager and you should be having this conversation on a regular basis, because job opportunities don't come up at the end of the year for everyone. They come up, all through the year, and you just want to be ready for that, when that opportunity comes, because you've been showcasing and you've been, understanding where you're delivering and where the opportunities are. Nothing more depressing than getting to the end of the year and someone saying to you, yeah, but if you'd done this earlier, you would have been on track for a perfect year. And you're like, well, why didn't you tell me? And the answer is, well, why didn't you ask? So if you ask, then, you will know up front.
Yeah, completely. That ongoing conversation, I think, is so important. I in my job approach a lot of people, obviously, to talk about their career path, what that future looks like. And the most common rebuttal I get is, I'm not ready for a career conversation. And my view is, you should always be ready for a career conversation, because the timing of my approach and this role, and whether it's right for you or not, the timing is probably never perfect, but you've got to engage in the career conversation, whether that's internally or externally, as opposed to just closing the door. And I think that the smartest individuals whose careers will go further will engage in the career conversation, because they're always ready to have it. And then they can take control over the decision making around the timing. But to refuse the conversation doesn't make sense to me.
I agree. Just one build on that, though. I would say there's also the sweet point, which is the opposite, which is someone who wants, every time you sit down with them, they want to talk about their career every month. And that's, for me, also, that's the other extreme, which is nothing changes month on month. Like take, quarterly, no problem, but talking every month, what's going to happen, where you're going to go. I think that's also, so you have to find that sweet spot, and you need to do that also, be able to do it in a formal and informal setting, because it doesn't have to be a formal, these conversations could be in a car driving to a customer. They could be at the end of the week when you had it, it doesn't have to be a deliberate sit down. The only other thing I would say is summarize in your mind what the conversation was about and capture it, because sometimes your understanding and your boss's understanding, or your managers, it could be a little bit different. So do take the time to, just close the loop, as I would say, and, this is what we talked about, and here are the areas that I think I need to develop based on your guidance. Can you help me in this area, or is there somebody else who can help? And this is what I'm going to be focused on. And I think closing that loop just seals that you've had the conversation.
Yeah, great advice. One of the questions I've asked the last couple of individuals on the program, Kim, I'm going to keep asking this question, because I'm really interested in the variety of answers we're going to get, which is, I guess, views from the top. You're in the role of a senior leader, and one of the things that we often hear about is the healthy tension between sales and marketing. In your view, what is that?
Yeah. The healthy tension. I think tension, I think there's always tension in our organization. There's, there are very functional delineations, but I think that's blown in just for the future. I think that in the future, sales and marketing will be agnostic. You can see also in the digital world how that's evolving, and really that functional divide is sort of is blurring. So for sure, the future won't look like these functional pillars. I think the job of sales is to bring the outside in, is to understand how do we take the idea that marketing's generated to the customer and then execute it in store for the shopper. And everybody understanding their role and responsibility and listening to each other, and having the opportunity to feedback is, I think, where you find a sweet spot. it's very rare that we all agree. I mean, even now on, new innovation we have coming, all of us have different perspective. I think part of that, the tension is understanding people's roles and responsibility, being, able to feed back and into it, and not having to be right all the time. I mean, many of our ideas, as I said, come from, it's not a seniority thing, it comes from people that are closest to the business, people who understand it. But then recognizing across that function, I mean, for our marketing team, often they're in, they're in an office, they're not out with the people, they're not hearing the customers. So getting them immersed, and both and involving sales early in the piece, I think it reduces that tension. It gets everyone pointing in the same direction. And while there is, I think there's tension to be had, because we should, if you're passionate, you have robust discussions and debates. But the end result is we hold hands and we go forward, and we decide on that together. And sometimes we'll get it right and sometimes wrong, and sometimes it'll be a marketing decision and sometimes it's a sales decision. But whatever the decision is, that we, all take it, and we all take responsibility for whatever that execution looks like. And I think that's the right level of tension, and that's what drives the best results. And it doesn't stay the same. It's not static. It changes, especially, according to what's happening in the market, what's coming out, and it slips according to people's expertise and what they can bring to the party. So I think navigating that, being open to it, listening, but having robust discussion for me is where you actually perfect the idea and make sure that, it's ready to execute in the best possible way.
Yeah, great. One of the areas I've seen a big change in, Kim, is the increase in data and analytics within the sales function. Talking about sales and marketing, used to be the domain of marketing had all the access to research and made their decisions accordingly. But within sales, we've seen an enormous amount of data influence the way in which we work. What do you think the future is, and how do you think analytics will change the sales function?
Yeah, so I think you're spot on. It's already changing it, and one of our core competencies now is being able to interpret and leverage that data. And most of that data, a huge part of it, sits with customers. So that sits in the sales, in the sales area, scope of responsibility. I think that it's going to continue to evolve. I think we need to understand not only and there's so much data, it's overwhelming. So understanding what are the core skills, how to use that data so that it's, driving our business forward, and that it's not, it's not hindering, it's enabling, it's giving us insights that gives us the chance to access an opportunity, and not just talking the sake of data for data. I think we need to get very focused on what's the data we need to execute our strategy, where is the opportunities, and then what data do we need to do that. Today, there is so much data readily available, but we don't know how to use it. And we're learning as a function how to use it, what to ask for, when to use it, and who owns that data. That's also the challenge, like who owns it at the end of the day, and how do we partner to use it so that, it's used in the right way, basically from a PII standpoint, but also from a, standpoint of how do we add value in using that data for the customer and for our business.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of, I think it often changes the conversation between sales, marketing, and also the CEO, and the CEO plays a very interesting role, I think, in the sales function. But for you as a leader, you have a lot of interaction with the CEO. For a lot of people on today's call, they won't, and it'd be interesting to get your view on the CEO's view of sales. And as a leader, what do you think the CEO expects of the sales function, the sales leader?
Yeah, it's a great question. And we have all different business units, and the CEO head, I mean, obviously we go all the way up to a president, but generally we have a senior vice president who's basically managing a business unit. So for us in healthcare, that person is relying on sales to bring the outside in. We are the connection to reality. So give us the insights. What is the customer saying? What are they telling us? What are the dynamics? The second thing they're relying on us is what is the best way to get our products to market? Is the model that we're using today sustainable? Is it going to address things for the future? And the third is, where can we add value? How can we streamline? What can we use? What can we learn from what's out there? And I think, those areas are, again, constantly evolving. So they're expecting us to tell them what's changing and to execute the strategy that we've agreed on as a business, as per the plan. sometimes there's a gap between, you know, what the strategy is and how it's executed. And I think they're expecting us to execute the agreed plan, and to feedback fast if it's not working for whatever reason, if it doesn't deliver on what our expectations are, and what we would need to do to actually make interventions to either make it stronger or to realize other opportunities.
Yep. Okay. Okay. Couple of questions, and we've got, I think, before we finish up, one jumping back to data has come through on the chat from Catherine. Building on the point of data, P&G have an incredible reputation in category leadership. What role do you see for successful category leadership discipline, for a successful category leadership discipline to succeed?
Yeah, we do. I mean, category is, for us, it's like, how do we bring that shopper, and how do we decide where the next big opportunity is? And that really understanding and stepping back and not being brand centric, again, being category, agnostic, or being focused on the broader category. I think that role is really to identify, not just to how does P&G take pieces of the pie, how do we grow the pie? I mean, for us, category is about how do we grow it? What can we do differently? What insights can we drive from the dynamics that are happening in the category? And where is it evolving? Where is it going? And how do we pursue that? We have amazing analytics. We have amazing capabilities in this area. And I think it's the brainchild before, to how we execute our marketing plans and our strategy, and being ahead of it and learning and understanding, that formula, I think, is unbelievably powerful. And it's a skill that actually I think all salespeople should learn along the way. Actually, I think marketers and salespeople need to do a role in category. I think it's super helpful in really understanding, how we actually bring those insights to life. And the same for marketing, so that then they, we don't put the blinks on just to talk about our brand only. The customer wants to talk, so we talk in a customer framework, and we also talk about how we grow it. It's not, as I said, cutting up the pie into taking somebody else's pie. It's about how do we grow that whole pie, and that's what I believe the category team is doing.
Yeah, completely agree. Final area I want to get into is I want to revert back to a question from Dimitri, but also something I wanted to ask you about as well. Is around, if we look at the FMCG sector broadly, it's perhaps today not as high profile in terms of attracting the best graduates. Whereas going back 10, 20, 30 years, it was one of the go-to sectors to get into. So Dimitri asked a question, would you wish that your kids would get into sales, which I find interesting because my son graduates from uni this year, and he's actually interviewing with quite a few FMCG businesses. Now, I think that's partially because of my background and specialization, but because he's not one of many of the graduates of his cohort who are doing that. What do you think we have to do to attract more people into FMCG and consider sales as a profession?
Yeah, it's a great question. And of course, because we do lots of college recruitment or university recruitment, it's a really big and important thing. I think that what youth wants is something different to what we've offered historically, and we have to evolve. As we interview millennials today, and this next generation, what they're looking for is agility. They want flexibility. They don't necessarily see something for the long term, and we need to be able to build careers and opportunities. They want visibility, flexibility to go in and out of a job. And I think that that's something that we haven't showcased and we haven't talked about. I think FMCG is an amazing place. The sexy companies today are all the Googles and Facebooks, and they are with it. They're doing things that are, offering from a package standpoint, all the things that are important: flexibility, groovy working place, speed, ability for anyone to move quickly. What an FMCG does is that it gives everyone some broad-based skills across many areas. Digital is still a very big part of the skills we're learning today. And I think that we need to continue to demonstrate that we are also playing in that space, and that is our future. And the technologies that we've got, that we can bring, and the tools that we've got. This is again about narrowness and breadth, but FMCG company, apart from learning the fundamentals, which I think are evolving, we also have these very new evolving types of careers that are very different, that are very similar to what you could find in the Googles, and we need to evolve more of those. And we need to give people, opportunities to incubate and try different types of roles rather than our standard. And I think as an organisation, PNG is going to evolve that over time too. We're already creating new roles that didn't exist, and the more we create, the more that lures, I think, some of the next generation of leaders into the FMCG business.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a passion of mine, and I think FMCG has played an amazing role in society in the last year. And I think people are looking for organizations where they can have a meaningful impact on society, and FMCG does that, but we don't really blow that trumpet quite loudly enough. But Kim, we're at time, unfortunately. We could continue this conversation for another 45 minutes, I reckon. But thank you so much for your insights, your energy, your time, and sharing your experiences today. Fascinating career in terms of what you've done at P&G, and I'm sure you'll get a few more LinkedIn requests from today's call, if you don't mind. I think we got to most questions on the chat, guys, but thanks everybody for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you all again on May the 6th when we have our next session. We have Alexia Hawley, who's the Senior Sales Director for PepsiCo, on, and really looking forward to the session with Lex. As always, you're all welcome to join the Marketing Director Incubator as well. They're super fascinating. We've got that happening on May 20th. Nick Boyden, who's a Global VP of the Centrum brand for GSK. So that's going to be a really interesting conversation. To reiterate, all the sessions for the Sales and Marketing Director interviews are on the Your Future in Sales and Marketing podcast. Subscribe to that on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Kim, thank you again for your time today, and guys, have a great Thursday.
Super. Thanks, Mike. Take care, everybody. Stay safe. See you soon. Bye.